Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I am super, super excited for today's event. I have two amazing co-panelists. I know we marketed this as a webinar. We're going to run it more as a fireside chat, as a little conversation amongst friends. And it's just going to be a very conversational, very flowy dialogue that we're having today. And I'm just super excited. So my name is Alexine Moudouar. I am CEO of Women in Sales. We are an organization focused on helping women find success in the field of sales, ensuring that women's voices are heard, and centering women's voices in sales-centric conversations. And interestingly enough, we are partnered with the lovely Apollo, who is co-presenting this event today. So Zoe, I'm going to put you on the spot, channel those sales roots. Tell us a little bit about Apollo.
I think Apollo is a seller's best friend. It's just kind of like your space to operate out of. I think of it as sort of the central hub that a seller lives in day to day. We're an end-to-end go-to-market platform, everything from the leads you need to the way to engage them to conversational intelligence and meetings to help you close those deals and expand those accounts. So really, really excited to be here. Love partnering with Women in Sales, and so excited to be here with my CRO, Leandra.
Yes, and we're excited to be here with both of you. So as we jump into the conversation today, our topic is the sales journey, and we left it purposefully vague because we're going to be talking about so much. We're going to talk about each of our journeys into sales. We're going to talk about what the unique pathways are and how all roads can still lead to a successful career. And we're going to leave you with some inspiration, some motivation, and all the good feelings. So if you are joining us, if you're in the chat here, say hello. Let us know where you're joining from. We always love hearing from all of you. And most importantly, make sure to drop your questions in the Q&A tab. It's a little bubble. It says Q&A. So drop your questions. We will try to weave those in and or save them till the end. And before anyone asks, yes, this session is being recorded. Yes, it will be available after the event. And let's get into it. So let's start with you, Zoe. If by some chance people don't know who Zoe Hartsfield is, tell us a little bit about yourself and let everyone know who you are.
Yeah, so my name is Zoe. I run executive presence and evangelism here at Apollo. I get to work with fantastic executives like Leandra. And I got my start in sales and was fortunate enough to move into marketing. And now I kind of get to do a weird hybrid of the role. But I sort of self-describe as like sales biggest hype woman. I like to create content on LinkedIn to help sellers early in their career level up. I was really grateful to learn from people on LinkedIn when I was an SDR and didn't really have any training or enablement at the company that I worked for, and was able to become a top rep very quickly simply by finding mentors and resources outside of my organization to help me level up. And so that's something I feel really passionate about in terms of giving back. Did that answer your question?
It sure did.
Okay.
Leandra, who I have to say, everybody was so excited. I feel like there was just such a buzz on LinkedIn when you got your new CRO role. So I'm super excited that we get to partner with a company who has an amazing woman at the revenue helm. So tell folks who you are. Tell them a little bit about yourself, Leandra.
Well, first of all, thank you, Alexine, for inviting us today. Zoe's my bestie in marketing. We do everything together in terms of communicating all the great things about Apollo. But Alexine, I was thrilled to have a chance to meet you, and you joined us for our big Olympus event last week. So excited to be here, to be a part of your incredible community. My name is Leandra Fishman. I am the CRO at Apollo and have been here, about 5 months. It's been a whirlwind, but really excited to have the opportunity to sell something to my tribe. That's one of the reasons why I came to Apollo. I was so excited about being able to sell a tool that really helps impact the place that I've spent my whole entire career in. So I've been around the block. Hopefully my potions and lotions are holding up, but I've been selling for about 33 years. And I started at the very bottom, worked my way up, and I've had the opportunity to sell in a lot of different types of verticals. So manufacturing services, consumer hardware, enterprise software, at a wide range of companies. I've done 10-person startups and Fortune 500 work in a lot of different ways. But to me, the essence is always about solving customer problems, building relationships, and being a part of great teams. So really excited to be here with you both today and also have a chance to connect with the community.
Amazing. So happy to have you here. And also, If you are part of our Slack community, we did post the recording to last week's Apollo Olympus event, which was incredible. I don't know how many people registered. Zoe knows, but it was like tens of thousands. It was insane. It was the biggest
Over
number.
20,000.
Okay. Over 20,000. So close to this event today, basically. So we are super excited. So check out that recording if you haven't. We had an all-women panel on AI and sales, and I highly recommend that. But to kick off today's conversation, again, we're going to keep this kind of open format. We're all going to talk amongst each other. So it's going to be less of a webinar feel. But to kick things off, Zoe, let's start with you. How did you first get into sales? How do you always plan to get into sales? And we'll each kind of take this question and pass it around here.
I mean, does anyone like plan to get into sales? Like Leandra asked this question to me months ago when we were chatting, and she was like, what did you want to be when you grew up? I was like, a backpack. Like I just had no plans for my future, my career. It was sort of decided for me that I was supposed to go to law school. And I was in a really terrible car accident when I was 21. And it kind of ruined my schooling in a way. Like I couldn't read, I couldn't tie my shoes, I had to take a year off, failed a bunch of classes when I tried to go back to school, had to take more time off. And so I was like a super duper senior when I finally graduated, had a bunch of like exceptions to get my degree. So my GPA was literal garbage. And I was basically having to work very hard to get a really good score on the LSAT if I wanted a prayer of getting into law school, because that was the expectation. And while I was studying for the LSAT, while I was still finishing my senior year of college and studying for the LSAT, I found I stumbled into sales. Truly. It was just, there were 2 tech companies in the city of Colorado Springs. I applied to both of them. One of them gave me an interview and they were like, what experience do you have selling? And I just told them a bunch of stories about the times that I opened company credit cards when I worked for Banana Republic, folding sweaters. So I just found some transferable skills and told as many stories as I could. I think honestly, they were desperate for bodies. And so they gave me the job. But I fell in love with it. And I had the opportunity. I actually was supposed to sit for the LSAT and had a final round interview with a different tech company, their CEO. They couldn't reschedule it. It was my one shot. And so I blew it off. I was like, I can take it another time. And I never really looked back after that. So I stumbled into sales out of just desperation and necessity. And yet, even though it was something I never would have planned for, and initially my family was very disappointed that I decided not to go to law school, they don't feel that way anymore now that they've seen kind of my progression.
Yes. Awesome.
That's amazing. I love your story, Zoe, because I think it really is so true that we don't necessarily grow up thinking sales is where we want to be. I can tell you that my family upbringing didn't talk about education at all. And so I didn't have a big grand plan. In my very first job, I ended up in a sales office in a customer service role, which is kind of like a hybrid back in the day in between order processing and an EA and kind of inside sales and, a little bit of account support in general. And just what I quickly realized is that everyone was really focused on the number. But I didn't really think about it in terms of trying to drive that number. I was really about building customer relationships, solving customer problems. And I just thought it was fun to show up, every day and be able to make an impact in that way and then see those results in the number. I was like, wow, this is a really cool place to be. But I had no plan and didn't even have a clarity in the path on where I was going. I really just kept my head down and worked hard and saw the impact and the influence that I could make was fun to measure.
Oh, amazing. I was thinking about kind of early foundation stories when we were putting this event together. And I don't know if I've ever shared this on an event, but my game plan was, and I had this talk track down from age 7 onwards. I kid you not. I was like, I'm going to be a neurosurgeon and I'm going to Johns Hopkins University. I used to say this at little family gatherings and wine tastings at my mom's restaurant. Would gasp and ooh and ah. So unfortunately, it turns out I'm a hypochondriac and I hate the idea of touching germs or blood or communicable illnesses. So I was out. That career path didn't work. And I ended up going into retail sales because I wanted to become a retail buyer and I wanted to work for a Chanel or Neiman Marcus. And I wanted to go to Milan and pick out fabrics and do all these cool things. And quickly learned that wasn't what that role typically looked like. It was going to be a lot of time in a stock room. There was a lot more work behind the scenes and I didn't appreciate that fully, and got an opportunity Still to this day, I have no idea how, but made my way onto an AE role. Basically, almost right out of college with zero experience. And there were about 17 people in my training class. And basically, it was a sink or swim. Most of you are going to get fired. A couple of you will make it. And I made it in that class. I was their top rep within a year, and the rest is history. But yeah, sadly, I did not make it to Johns Hopkins. And I just want to apologize to everyone I told that I wouldn't make it there.
This was destined for you, though. I mean, I can't even imagine seeing you in that type of role, because it really seems like the essence of your energy is really deeply connected in with, building relationships and solving problems and things like that. So I'm sure you would have been great at that, but we're glad we caught you in our nest here.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Can you imagine? I'd be like, I don't want to touch this patient. Sorry. It would have been a long journey into surgery. So much respect for all the roles out there. One of the really interesting pieces of connective tissue for this particular event that I think is really unique is each of us had these weird and wacky kind of like journeys once we got into sales too. I think we talk a lot about, and I hear a lot of topics about like, how did you initially get into sales? And similar to what you said, Zoe, everybody's kind of like, I didn't mean to, I kind of fell into it. It just happened. But then nobody, like, you don't hear as much of that journey of once you got into sales, then what? What was that journey like? And so Zoe, would love to kick off with you and talk about sort of like your trajectory, because you went like sales, marketing, sales and marketing. And then Leandra, would love to go to you to talk about kind of that customer service to CRO transition point as well.
My goodness. Also, I'm so excited to hear Leandra's, so I'm going to go through mine really fast. So I started as an inbound SDR, and it was like a pretty high volume PLG product. I'm not exaggerating when I say I booked 170 meetings a month. It was inbound. And so I was qualifying these prospects. I'd get like 250 leads, and there was like a pretty solid motion, a lot of math that went into it. But basically, by the time I got off ramp, I was hitting accelerators. And so within 6 months, they were like, hey, we're creating this sort of pilot outbound team. We've never really outbounded. We have one rep who handles mid-market, like up-market accounts, and she handles the inbound stuff, but nobody's really outbounding. So do you and like these 3 other people want to do this? And I was like, yeah, of course. I did not know that outbounding meant cold calling. I found that out later, but went into it. And like I mentioned earlier, I had nobody had done it. Nobody on this team had done it. There was nobody like super duper senior. There was one girl who had done outbound at a previous company before. So I literally actually wrote a post about this that I'll post later this week, but I went and asked her, like, I was like, can I get this desk by you? Can I sit by you? And I asked my manager. So I just sat next to her. We role played for 20 minutes every single day before our call blitzes, because I was just like so terrified of the phones. And so I would just like pound it into myself. Also, for the record, I never got like amazing at the phones. I could do it. I did it. It was fine, but I never was like super amazing at it. But I did figure out how to get to, 140% of quota within like 8 months in the role. And then my manager was like, okay, so what's next for you? And I was like, I have no idea. And he's like, okay, well, why don't you write down all the stuff that you hate doing and never want to do again? And then we'll circle back to the stuff that you like. And that was actually a really helpful exercise for me, and how I figured out that I wanted to go into marketing. Because I was like, I never want to make another gosh darn cold call in my life, which I don't feel that way anymore. Like I wouldn't be excited about it, but I would pick up the phone and make a cold call today if I needed to. And I probably will in the coming months for some content. So you can look forward to that, me suffering through it. But I ended up in marketing because I was like, I love writing. I love starting conversations with strangers. What if I did that at scale? I love the relationship aspect. I think the thing that was interesting about the company I was at is because it was pretty transactional. Even as I went up to mid-market, it was just sort of like siloed, like SDR handed off the meeting. I was pretty tight with my AE, so I kept that relationship going through the sale, but then it went off to CS and I never spoke to those people again. So I ended up in marketing and actually partnerships, which I loved. And so I was still tied to revenue, still really loved it, kind of stumbled into this community thing, did community marketing at another company. And then I started doing demand gen, and then ended up as a head of marketing for like a very brief stint, which was super duper scary. And now I'm here and I get to just sort of exercise all of my favorite skills and write and collaborate with executives to help them build their brands. And just empower employees internally and teaching them social selling, which is something I learned as a seller. And now I get to sell sponsorship to our events. And that's been pretty fun to kind of like come full circle and get to sell again. So that's sort of been my journey. It's sort of haphazard. It was like sales, away from sales, partnerships, kind of sales, then to marketing and demand gen, then back to sales a little bit. And it's been the best.
Amazing.
I think you're in your zone of genius, though, Zoe, because you are really bringing all of your skills together, I think, in a way that is just really powerful. And it's fun to see the things that we have in common. Alexine, I feel the same way about you. I started in retail. And I think when you start in retail, you kind of just get a little bit of that service type, mentality. And there's something also that I think is like kind of the exchange of monetary flow in retail, I think kind of connects you in. But as mentioned, I didn't have a plan to getting in sales, and I didn't have a plan on getting into management. Early in my sales career, when I was just starting out, I was told that I would never be successful. And I actually believed that to be true. And so I didn't have any career aspirations because my upbringing didn't focus around education. So unlike the clarity that both of you had about going to college, I didn't go to college. And that wasn't a part of my kind of family environment. So I was just kind of stumbling around in my own independence and just started working because that's what you do. And when I got into the sales, this first sales office, and I was in customer service, I thought, okay, I think I'm ready. I think I'm ready for that next step. And I went to my VP of the sales office and I said, I think I want to be, kind of this next level, and which was kind of a formal salesperson. And he said, do you have a college degree? And I said, no, I don't. And he said, well, you'll never be successful without it. And I hadn't heard that as a message. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. I must have missed that. And so really kind of in my mind, told myself that I wasn't really going to be able to achieve or accomplish very much. And throughout my career, as I was taking each step, was really just going up the ladder, not with a purpose, because I was like, I'm going to show you, or I've got somewhere to go. I was kind of just like, keep your head down, work hard, have a good attitude, have good intentions, solve problems, but don't get above the radar where maybe somebody can tell you that you have capabilities or you don't. And so really through hard work, determination, persistence, I kind of was moving up, but I was kind of doing it slowly, like every 3 years, again, because I didn't think that I was going to be this big smash of a career success. So I did about 3 years in that first customer service role. Then I did about 3 years in inside sales. When I learned about commissions, I had no idea even what the concept was. But I was like, this is kind of fun. And then I took a year off and I went into operations. I've always gotten every job from a referral. And so someone wanted to hire me, and I started getting into operations, which I loved, which was forecasting and capacity management. But I was supposed to be the one banging my fist on the table, like, we need better pricing, we need faster service. And all I could say to my vendors was like, how can I help you? How can I serve you? And that's when I just realized that like sales was in my DNA. And I said, I got to get back. And Zoe, like you, I got back into a farmer. I got back into a hunter role, and I was just like, this is not my jam. I was a farmer. I was just like, give me existing accounts, let me build relationships, let me solve problems, and always had careers where that success was much more in that AM or farmer role versus a hunter. So I hear you, Zoe. I could do it today. I'm not afraid to pick up the phone. But back in the day, I thought this is hard, and it felt really scary. But each step of my career, I never knew I was going to get into management. I didn't have a strategy. I wasn't trying to climb the ladder. I just wanted to make an impact. And I believe that like through hard work, anything can be accomplished. And I think I was just one of those type of people that had really strong work ethic, determination, and a lot of focus to be able to find a path to success.
Can I ask a question? I'm really curious, Leandra, like you said, leadership was never the plan. And yet I've had the privilege of working with you for the last, how long have I been here? Like 3.5 months, whatever it is. You are objectively one of the most gifted people leaders, as well as like revenue leaders I've worked with, observed, and like in any capacity. And so it seems so obvious to me that you would lead people because of your ability to communicate, because of your genuine care, because of your experience as a practitioner. Like, what was the moment for you? Because you don't stumble into a CRO role. Let's be real. Like not at Apollo.
It's been 33 years.
I know. But like, what was that moment? What was the tipping point where you were like, oh, I think my skill set is really going to lend itself to like developing other people to be great too?
Yeah, it wasn't, like I said, something that I had in my mind. But what I was 3 years in an inside sales role, 3 years in kind of a field sales role, now spent a total of almost like 9 to 10 years as an individual contributor. I went to a very small startup company, and I just was solving problems, and I could see that there was a lot of problems that I could help because I was at corporate and the other salespeople were not at corporate. And so there was a job that was posted for a director, and I went to my VP and said, I think I'm ready to get into management. And he said, no, you're not. You don't have enough experience, and you don't have all of these things. And I looked at this checklist of things and I thought, yeah, you're right. That's not me. And I told him, why don't you find that person because they look amazing, and I'll do the job for free. I didn't ask for a title. I didn't ask for the money. I just said, let me just help solve some problems because I think I can make a difference. And
Wow.
after 6 months, they didn't find the perfect person. They said, she's not doing such a bad job. And so when I stumbled into that opportunity, then I recognized, though, I was managing people that were twice my age with twice as much experience, and I didn't know what to do for them. So first of all, I've always been very, very self-taught. I'm an avid reader, and I just bought a bunch of books on leadership and really just tried to apply a lot of the principles. But instead of telling people what to do, I asked what I could do to help them. And so I really just embraced this servant leadership mindset to be able to help lift teams up and not just solve customer problems, but solve team member problems in a way that's helping for the greater good of the company. And I think one of the things that are important about leadership is, and there's some great books about, I think Simon Sinek has a book like Leaders Eat Last. It's just like leadership isn't about you. It's about your team. It's about your company. It's about your customers. And I think because I've always had that North Star, I'm really clear on what's truly important. And I've also, just done a lot of my own personal work to try and be my best, give my best to my teams in a way that really just helps them be their best. And that's what brings me joy.
That's
Cool.
amazing. I'm seeing a lot of servant leader comments, which is exactly what you're speaking to. I think the point about educational background is so critical right now because still to this day, we're hearing this talk track of you have to have a degree, you have to do this. And there's just so many shining examples in our industry that that's just not the case. And also many of us who did get degrees haven't necessarily put those to use anyway. So it was, but it sure cost a lot of money. So I think it's really exciting to see some of these like kind of industry norms be broken down a little bit more. And I think, as we think about leaders, yes, this servant style leadership, it's so incredibly critical. It's amazing to hear from Zoe firsthand what type of leader you are. I don't work for your company, but I feel like I work closely with you all. So I feel like you're like a quasi leader and I look up to you. So I think it's really important. I was thinking when you were talking to Leandra, so my mom owns a restaurant and catering business still to this day. And one of the things, so when I grew up, I had to go to caterings all the time. And if anybody had like a restaurant parent, that life, it was brutal. So I'd be at like a Tuesday, 11 p.m. and they're like cleaning up the catering and trying to finish off. And I just want to go to bed. And I would get so angry because I was like, why don't we just leave? Like you own the business. We could just go home and other people will clean it up. And which is a horrible thing, like an 8-year-old to say. But at the same time, I remember like my mom always telling me, that I don't leave until it's done. Like I'm there, my team's there, then we're going to leave at the same time. So when the job's done, I and the team will go home at the same time, but I don't leave my people to just do stuff on their own. And so that was a really valuable lesson from an early age. And that I took kicking and screaming. But I think those are just so integral, those lessons that we have early on too.
It's amazing that you had your mom as that example of her just, through action saying, it is ultimately our responsibility as owners, as leaders, as managers, to take care of everyone else and make sure that everything goes smoothly.
Absolutely. And, speaking to also like personal journey, I know a lot of folks are also going down like a similar path to what I did right now, which is like they're going from kind of individual contributor roles to launching their own businesses. So just to also kind of like bring that about, that's a potential career path. We have a lot of people who are going into consulting, into training, into launching their own businesses and taking that. And I think what's beautiful about those paths and similar to the one I took, you don't lose anything by being in sales. If anything, it gives you a jumping start. I have a lot of like really successful entrepreneurs and early stage company leaders who don't have like the sales skill set. And they come to me and they're like, I am really suffering from this. And they're like technically inclined. They're they have the engineering chops, they have everything else. And they're like, the sales part is killing me, especially like early on, especially in these first days. And so just to kind of like set the stage for that as well, that if you do decide to do something on your own, sales is one of the most incredible ways. You're already running your own business. You're already running your own book. You're already planning your weeks out. A lot of this just rolls right into entrepreneurship if and when you decide to go down that path one day too. So
I think sales like also can make you better. I mean, we talked about non-traditional career paths. Like I went into marketing. I technically still am in marketing. I am a better marketer because I was a seller. I'm a better marketer at a revenue tech company that sells to sellers because I was in sales, because I know that pain intimately, because I've used all the tools, because I've sat in that seat. I also think, as a marketer, let's be real, we get away with a lot. Like we can, it's a different type of job. We write a lot of, I send an email out to 10,000 people and, if some of them convert, amazing. In sales, it's like, I have one contact at this company. And if I blow it with them, I've killed that account. And I probably am not going to get a chance to go back if I don't. So like, you have to be so dialed in. You have to be thoughtful about your day. You have to map out your accounts. Like there's so much that you have to be good at in terms of like time management, organization, follow up, just getting good at these skills, regardless of whether you continue on in sales, whether you go work in product or customer support or customer success or marketing, or, I don't know a lot of people that went from sales to engineering, but you could do that too. I just think the skills that you learn and like the discipline, especially if you're willing to put in the work to become a top performer in sales, like that goes with you to every role after that, whether you move up in sales, in leadership, or in bigger and badder sales roles, or whether you traverse to another department.
Yeah, love this. And Leandra, Zoe led us into kind of where we were headed next, which was about kind of like, where does having this career path, this focus in sales, how does that help you become a better leader? Even if folks are choosing to go into different roles, to Zoe's point, how is sales really integral to building some of those foundational elements?
Yeah, it's exactly what you both have said. Sales is a life skill, a life skill. I never really considered myself a salesperson. I just thought I was building relationships and solving problems. And it's all about communication and listening and being empathetic. And, there's just so many skill sets that are a part of, having this incredible tool bag that you can apply anywhere. And what I would really tell people is just to go inside and listen to yourself and kind of figure out what you're passionate about. Because you can use sales as a springboard to anything. Whether you're more interested in numbers and want to go into more operations, or whether you're more interested in product and you really kind of want to build things, or whether like Zoe, you kind of like have a marketing ability to communicate, you can take it either into a management track or you can take it into a career track, which is really a lot of people start out as kind of a BDR, SDR, which I think is the hardest job in the world, moving up into kind of carrying a quota. But then you go from SMB to mid-market to enterprise. And so you're really increasing your complexity in your sales skills, or you take it down a different route which is adjacent to it, where it's more like Zoe said, kind of marketing, or it's an interest of something that, and anything you do, you have to communicate with people. You need to be a good listener. You need to be able to solve problems. You need to be able to negotiate. I always wished my kids when they were little understood the power of negotiation because it's something that's just inherent to our DNA of human beings that I think can take you wherever you want to go. But I would really say just like listen to yourself. Ask yourself what you love, what you don't like. Find things that you can do to connect to that passion, and look for something that's a little bit deeper in the way of not just like what is the task oriented to do, but what excites you about being able to apply your passions and your interests, whether it's to people or to products or to process, and you can find your way there.
Yeah, this is amazing. I feel like, so Natalia Wilson asked a question in Q&A, and I feel like Natalia has access to my brain because this was literally the next question we were going to go into. So congratulations. But the question, and I'm going to pop it onto the stage, is thoughts on making the decision of continuing the journey as a tenured AE that has a passion for being in front of customers on a human to human level versus moving up into a manager/director role that is more people leader, pros and cons. And the reason that this fits in really nicely is that was sort of where we were headed next to this conversation is, what happens if you don't want to be a people leader? And that's like the forbidden fruit. We're not allowed to talk about, like, we're always kind of working towards this next step. It feels like, what happens if we maybe don't want to go down that path? So definitely want to answer Natalia's question and give, either of you an opportunity to answer this. And then we'll talk deeper on the other side of this about sort of the pathways. So I'll pop it back up on here so you have it in front of you.
Leandra, I think this is you because you've done all the things. You've done everything.
I think it goes back to just don't be a manager because you think that that's what you should do. Mm-hmm. Because most of the shoulds in life don't send us to the path that really connects us with our deeper desires. Mm-hmm. And listening to yourself and saying what really excites me, if it's really about that level of wanting to be able to build relationships and get more complex deals and kind of the challenge of just what it takes to really kind of go up the ladder in sales in terms of the complexity around SMB, mid-market enterprise. I mean, some of the most incredible sellers I know that are the most successful have no interest in going into management. And they know that because going into management, it is just you can't control anything anymore. So for all of us control freaks out there, when you take that step into management, you're all of a sudden like, oh boy, now I got to trust all of these people to pull it together in a way that we're going to be able to win. So you really let go of control when you get into management, but it's really all about giving back. And so there's no one path, I think, that is right or wrong. It's really within you to say, do I want to be my best and kind of be in control of that and really drive that skill set? Or do I feel like I'm on a path where I really want to help and teach others? I really want to give back to others. I really want to help develop, the opportunity to do more than just that I can do as a sole, kind of AE or AM. I really want to help other people achieve their greatness and accomplish more with a larger team to be able to do that. And there's a lot of challenges that managers have too, because all of a sudden they're responsible for people both professionally and personally. I feel a big emotional responsibility for people's success. It's not just you anymore. You're really taking on the collective energy, and then you're also getting a lot deeper into being involved on positive notes for the company's strategy. But then there's a lot more pressure. There's a lot more expectation, and you have more exposure. Honestly, even though we all feel the pressure of carrying a bag and needing to make our numbers, there's a different level of kind of management exposure that you have in just being a part of the success and failure overall, the company as a whole. So I would say that, really just going back to saying what is exciting about you, challenging yourself to be your personal best, wanting to just kind of stay in that lane or wanting to give back, help other people grow, be a part of kind of deeper level strategies. There's no right or wrong. It's really up to you.
I think there's something also, and this is just the way that I did it. So sometimes people are like, I don't know which one I like more because they've never done the leadership thing fully. And so really kind of doing this exercise, I'm so grateful my manager back in the day had me do this exercise of like writing down the things about your role or the things that you think you would just hate doing every day. And then taking a look at the options, like an example of a job description. Can you ask your HR department, like, hey, our last sales manager role, can you just like shoot me the JD so I can look through it? And it's like, if 60% of that job and the day-to-day responsibilities are things that sound miserable to you, then maybe that's not your next step, and that's okay. And I think for me, figuring out what I didn't want to do was just as important as figuring out what I wanted to do and what I was passionate about. It actually helped me get clearer about what that looked like. It's how I decided not to be an AE. I was offered an AE promotion as an SDR, and I was like, no, I think I want to be a BDR manager. And then when that was more of a longer wait, I suppose, and the marketing opportunity came up, I was like, no, actually, this is like what I'm meant to do. And it was because I had done that exercise of like, what do I never want to do again if I can avoid it? And the AE role at that time at that company was not what I wanted to be doing all day, every day. And so I think sometimes it's just as powerful to like addition by subtraction, eliminate what you don't want to be doing. And then you'll kind of get clearer on what you want to do next.
Alexine, you probably know this better than anyone. You went from kind of being an individual contributor in AE now to being CEO. How did you decide to make that change?
Yeah, so I'll say when I was inside a company, I remember talking to this manager that I really loved at the time, and we were talking about leadership, and he kind of like started grooming me from like the very beginning, like when I started interviewing, we talked about the leadership pathway. So he did a lot of work behind the scenes that no one else ever saw. And he would actually like take me through the thought process. He's like, here's how like you see the X on the outside and you see this challenge. Here's how I actually have to work through that as a leader. And honestly, part of it took a lot of the glimmer away. Like I was like, ooh, this is like not that fun. Like he'd take me behind the scenes. I'm like too far behind the scenes. I don't want to know. And I remember one time he was asking me like, what are your, early on we were talking about key drivers. And I was like, I thrive off of like rewards and recognition. Like that's just like, if I have like a reward, I want to go towards it. And he's like, cool. What would it look like if that just completely went away? And now your focus is on other people's rewards and recognitions. And I remember I was like, oh, and it's really helpful to have a leader like that who really stripped away a lot of this like shiny exterior of like, this is what this role is going to look like. And you're going to have a special title and all these things. He was like, this is the real, and it's not pretty. And a lot of it behind the scenes isn't fun. And there's good stuff, but there's also bad stuff. And I'm going to show you all of it. And so I think for me, it was interesting seeing that when I was working for another company. When I went to work for myself full time, definitely a lot of that kind of like came to the forefront immediately. Like it isn't about you. It's about, for me, it's about the community. It's about resourcing. I always am trying to like think through ideas. I'll wake up at like 1 a.m. and think of like an idea for an event or a piece of content or some kind of offering for the community. My entire phone is full of just like notes that I keep that are like ideas or things I want to launch or like activities, but they're all focused on the community. It's not about me. It's not about what I want or my recognition. And that is like a tough transition. It is tough to transition away from sort of me to everyone else. But it's really critical too. And I saw in this comment here, Natalia, you were saying it's nice to hear by choosing to be an AE, it doesn't mean that you're hitting your ceiling. And I think that's such an important thing to point out, because for so long, I remember there was like a lifetime AEs and stuff. And they were like, they're the people who can't be leaders. Like they are unpromotable. And the irony was those were always the highest earners on the team. They made the most money, had the best relationships, and they didn't want to be leaders. And it was like, they were some of the best sellers I ever came across. So absolutely, it is possible to choose to stay in those roles. There are absolutely people who do that. And it's a highly respectable career. There's nothing better than being able to connect with your customers and being a trusted resource. And some people just have that on lock, and that's what they want to focus on. And that's a beautiful thing. And some people want to become leaders, and that's a beautiful thing too. It reminds me a lot of that debate of like big company versus small company. It doesn't matter. There's good and bad for both. And it's just about figuring out what's right for you. So I echo a lot of what was shared here as well.
I love that you said that, Alexine, because I think you can make the most money as an individual contributor. You know? And I've seen, people make a lot of money in enterprise software as an individual contributor.
I had an AE who was my favorite AE. He was the one who helped me become a top performer as an SDR. I had probably the worst AE before him, and then they were let go, and I was given the best AE, which was just really lucky. And I asked him one day, because he was so good with people. I was like, Danny, why aren't you the sales manager? He's like, they've asked me 12 times. I'm not interested in a pay cut. And it just like opened my eyes to the fact that he was like, I make so much more money as a successful AE, as like the top AE, than I would managing this team. And he's like, don't get me wrong, I love the team. Like, and he was like really a team player, really supportive, kind of did like the coaching stuff just as an AE, but he was like, I'm not interested in that pay cut. And that really was just like interesting to me and meaningful. I think there's a lot of different things that go into compensation, but it's true. Like, you make a lot as just like a top performing individual contributor, and you don't have the stress of other people's careers as well. So there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, I would really also encourage people to just think about what time it is in your life. There's so many different stages of our lives, and in different stages of my life where I was an individual contributor or a leader. Sometimes I've been a consultant or an advisor. Sometimes I'm full-time in an organization, and really just look around and say, okay, what are my life priorities right now? And while we can say, yes, we can do it all, I mean, the reality is, as we know, we still haven't figured out how to extend time. At least in this dimension, we're stuck with the framework that we've got for time, and just really knowing, okay, what's important for me in my life? what amount of time do I want to be able to give to the different parts of my life? And then how do I make sure that I'm not spreading myself too thin, and really saying, hey, it's okay, because at this point in my life, this is what's most important to me. And I want to have my career to be able to support that. Or I want to drive my career because that's the most important thing to me. And I'm going to know that that's going to be a priority too.
Yeah, absolutely. As we start to navigate towards our last few questions, which is crazy. I feel like we have not been on this event that long, but we have just a couple questions left from our side. Highly recommend, if you have questions for Zoe, for Leandra, you know where to find me if you have questions for me too. But ask them in the Q&A so we can make sure to get to them before this event ends. Keep dropping those. It's in the Q&A tab. And I also dropped in a little something from our friends at Apollo, because they have open roles, and they also have sign up for free. So check it out. There are some different things that are in the communication channel here, so keep looking. But another big question that comes up a lot, at least in the women in sales community, that I think would be really interesting to tap into is this traditional career path. So we talked a little bit about it, like the AE to manager, and like we have to do this because, you know, the world tells us that we have to. What about for folks who are like SDR, BDR, or AEs? You know, a lot of this, there's almost like this pre-map trajectory. If I'm an SDR, I have to become an AE. If I'm an AE, I have to become a senior AE. If I'm a senior, I have to go manager. Then you know, all these, and there's just all the steps afterwards. What are some of the other career paths that folks can consider, especially in those like SDR, BDR, AE days?
I've seen SDRs and BDRs go all throughout a company organization. I've seen them go into operations. I've seen them go into marketing. I've seen them go into product. Our VP of product right now started out as an SDR.
Christian, I was just thinking about him. It was like our first SDR, and now he's killing it in product.
So I think it's really just, again, like, where's your passion and interest? Are you really more on the relationships and revenue side? Are you more on the operational process side? Are you more on the product create and build side? I've seen a lot of people go into business development. You can go into partnerships. I mean, there's so many things in sales too. It's not like you just have to be a direct seller. You know, I always tell people, know your style. Most people gravitate towards being like a farmer or a hunter, but there's also business development, there's partnerships and channels, and like so many things that you can do. I would tell people, you know, get creative in your own organization and make friends. Go have some coffee chats with other people in your organization, shadow people and see what a day in the life is like in other organizations. And just, again, look at your own, as you know, it was mentioned, like, what's your list of the things you love and that you don't love, and try and find more of the things that you love than continuing with what you don't.
That's so good. The shadowing thing, I can't believe I forgot to bring this up. That's what I did. I shadowed with somebody in CS. I shadowed with a couple different people in marketing, because I was like, there's so many things you could do in marketing. And I was like, I don't want to be like a website optimization marketer. But when I sat with the copywriters and the people who were doing like email marketing and all of that stuff, and even demand gen, I was like, oh, this is like, I could do this. Like, this is really interesting to me. So getting that chance to do that, as well as like, there's so much value in networking with the leaders who could potentially be your manager if you do want to make that sort of internal traverse. It's really hard for people to fight for you if they don't know who you are. And so for me, what I did is, I was a BDR. I decided I didn't want to be an AE. I knew that the business development manager thing wasn't going to be available to me for 8 months. And I was like, I don't really want to wait around. And I went and made best friends with the VP of marketing. And I specifically asked him, I was like, what are the skill sets you would expect to see in somebody with this role? I found like the most entry-level role that was actually currently occupied, but she'd been in it for like a year and a half. And I was like, I bet she's going to get promoted eventually. What are the skills I would need? And she talked to me about what it would be. The manager talked to me about what it would be, and the VP did. And then they knew I was interested in it. And so I went and worked on those skills, and I would like report back on it monthly for like 2 or 3 months. And when he decided to open up the job, he slacked me the night before the rec opened. He's like, I expect your resume and application on my desk tomorrow morning. And like, there's just so much value in getting to know people. Because I did sit in with CS, and I did sit in with AEs and AMs. And I was like, this sounds terrible. I don't want to spend my day doing this. But that's not to say that they aren't amazing roles. It just would not have been the way that I would have thrived or like been excited. There's so much to be said for doing something that you love doing. You shouldn't,
Yes.
I hope nobody wakes up every day and is like miserable about what they do for work. I would say, Leandra, the last couple of months have been pretty like, we've been sprinting here at Apollo. We've been working pretty hard, but I wake up every day feeling so damn lucky for my job. And that would not have happened had I not spent the time early on figuring out what I loved and what I didn't love. So there's just, I want to echo that, what you said, Leandra, because it's just so valuable as you continue on in your career.
Yeah. Yeah. That idea of like studying and understanding what you like, what you don't like, that serves you through your entire career. It's the same thing even when we're planning for women in sales, I think about what are like the topics that perform well? What are like the types of formats of events that are really enjoyable, that feel like we're really pouring into the community, and which feel like are almost like taking away energy and time. And so that type of thinking can serve you regardless what type of role. I think back to earlier in my career, I had just this absolute love of conferences, which I know is super weird. And a lot of people hate conferences. I loved conferences. Like I would move mountains. And so I actually wrote an entire business plan when I was SDR team lead for one company. And I was like, I wrote my own role. And I pitched it to our entire leadership team, and I got buy-in somehow. I had to like go and pitch every executive at the company. And I was like, here's this role. Here's the revenue I could tie to it. Like, it was like that meme with like the board with all the strings, like like that. And I had this 1-page plan, and I was like, this is exactly what I'm going to do. This is how this role is going to be effective. And it worked. And like, we hit the revenue targets, and it all ended up panning out. But you know, that role didn't exist yet. So I also think getting creative, thinking outside of the box, looking for opportunities. So if you're on a team and you don't have a sales ops person, and you're noticing like, hey, we're struggling in XYZ, we seem as a team to need support in this area, I'd like to step up. I'd like to be that person. Present yourself to leadership as an option. Like, hey, I'm going to continue to crush it in my current role. That said, I want to put feelers out. I have interest in this area. I don't know if there's a role that's going to be available, or if we could co-create something. And if so, I'm game. So just putting yourself out there, kind of like raising your hand for things, is a great opportunity too. And thinking outside of the box, like just because you only have SDR and AE roles, doesn't mean those are the only roles that are ever going to be available at the company. So think outside the box, get a little weird with it, make a 20-page business plan like I like to do when I'm thinking through ideas, and see what happens.
I love that, Alexine. You were inspired. I mean, that's what I think the essence of what you're saying is, just like, you knew what you loved. You saw that there wasn't, you know, that role or that position. And though you were inspired to, you know, show that. And so many times it's either something that somebody's thinking about, maybe it hasn't been funded yet. Like you said, connecting in Zoe, like when that funding happened, or Alexine, like, hey, there's an opportunity for a position. And I think I can tell you as a leader, we're looking for people that are going to stand out. And so knowing, like, I always tell people, do you want to be average or do you want to be amazing? It's up to you. You hold that power within yourself to decide to shine a little bit brighter. Maybe it's going to feel a little bit uncomfortable, or maybe the outcome's uncertain. But if you don't put yourself out there, you know, what do they say? You're gonna miss all the shots that you don't take, right?
Leandra, you mentioned earlier, you were like, oh, Zoe, I feel like you're operating your sweet spot. Did you know that I wrote my JD? Did you know that like Dan approached me? And
No.
he was like, if you came to work here, what would you do? And so I literally just like, I knew what the goals were for the business. I knew what the goals were for his team. And I thought about all of my strengths, and I thought about all the ways that I thought I could provide value. And I thought specifically about like the thing that didn't exist that nobody had really pitched before was the executive evangelism piece that like we get to partner with on.
Yeah.
And I wrote that in, and that was like how I got the job. It wasn't actually that I was like the most qualified for this open rec. It was that there was a rec that was a little bit nebulous, and I rewrote it, and they were like, yeah, that's what we want. Exactly. And so like there's so much power in knowing what you want, because then you can go get it. And that's never happened to me before, by the way. Like, this is the first time in my career that's happened, but it's come from so many moments leading up to this where I got really clear on like, what do I love? What do I hate? What am I good at? What am I honestly not very good at? Like, sometimes you just got to take a good look in the mirror and realize like, this is not my skill set, and I don't care enough to get really good at it. So let's just not do that thing. But yeah, I think, man, I just feel really lucky that that was something I did early on. And something also I thought was really interesting as you were talking about events, Alexine, Leandra came to Inbound with us. She was slinging software. So it doesn't matter if you're a CRO or you're a BDR, like you're still, you could still be selling, and that skill will serve you throughout your career. I mean, Leandra, I just can't picture you asking your team to go anywhere you weren't willing to go to. I've seen you roll up your sleeves and do the work alongside your team. And like, I'm just curious, I know this is a tangent and then we can get back to our questions, but like how important is it as you develop in your career, like to still be willing to like be a practitioner in moments? How important is it?
I would never ask my team for anything that I wouldn't do myself. And half the time I'm ready to be in the trenches, or I'm rolling up my sleeves and I'm getting deep into it. First of all, you have a different appreciation for the problems. And most of the time your team has a lot of great solutions. And if you're not in it, you're not learning. I am so curious. I always want to understand the very deep details because I want to learn. I always tell my team, teach me something, because that inspires me, but it also helps me understand the greater environment that's happening for the business. And I think that when you really put yourself in the shoes, you don't have to have all the answers. Like when I was on the floor, I was the least qualified person to have any of the answers. But you know what I did? I just asked questions and I listened, and then I pulled in Zoe for like the answers. So it's not, you don't have to feel like you've got to know everything or you have to put yourself out there. And I think every time I didn't know, I was just like, I'm new. I've only been here 2 months. Let's go find somebody that has the answer. And people just want to be seen and heard, and they want to be understood, and they want to know that you care. And when you do all of those things, you do not have to be the one with the brilliant answers at the end.
Mm-hmm. Very well said. I'm gonna come work for you, Leandra. I'm not like
come on over, Alexine.
Everyone wants to work for Leandra.
Yeah, I'm just gonna come up. Maybe don't even put me on payroll. I'll just kind of like hang out with you each day for a few hours. Yeah, maybe go to conferences with you. So Leandra, we got a question for you. I'm gonna broaden the question because I get nervous when people ask me like super pointed questions. So they asked, you mentioned you're an avid reader. What is a leadership book that you've read recently or years ago that you still use or reference from leadership standpoint? And I will broaden it to either book, podcast, resource, person. That way you don't feel so on the spot, just in case.
Well, hi, Matt. It's nice to see you. And this is like picking a child. If I had thousands of children, which one would be my favorite? Because that's the way I feel about books. I am so emotionally attached to books. And I read so many of them. I mean, I have a lot of classics in my mind only because at that time in my life, it was really empowering. Now I read, like, first of all, I look on the New York Times bestseller list because I'm busy. Or I get a recommendation. So that's how I kind of suss out my books. Some great books that I've read. I mean, I just have ones that I love in the past that are so foundational that I'm trying to think of like something that I've read recently that really had an impact on me. Oh, Matt, you're putting me on the spot.
See, I told you this way. That's why I was like resource.
And you know what? Here's the problem, Matt. I read about 5 books at a time, and it's like one is business, one is leadership, one is spiritual, one is health related, and like one self-development. So it's like all those books are swirling in my mind. There's a lot of really good classics out there. First of all, in sales, I really encourage like Jeb Blunt's books for anybody that's a sales AE out there. He's got a bunch on fanatical prospecting, sales EQ, negotiation. He's current. And so I could say, yes, Dale Carnegie, The Art of winning and influencing people. Those things still actually hold true, which is amazing because they're 80 years old. From a leadership perspective, I am constantly just looking ways for developing leadership. And I think leadership is just as much around EQ as it is IQ. And so I think there's a lot of great books. I'm just reading a new book on kind of leadership intelligence. It's escaping me at the moment, but I'm always trying to either validate, like get reinforcement, learn something new, or kind of remind myself of certain things. And what I tell people about books is I could give you my long list of books and none of them might resonate with you. Mm-hmm. I really encourage people, go to a bookstore. Oh, it's my favorite happy place. Go into a bookstore, go into the business section, and I'm telling you, the book for you will speak to you. In color, in font, in opening up, in flipping through the pages. Go for a topic that it's like, hey, I really want to learn more about strategy, or I want to learn more about leadership development, or I really want to learn, something specific on a skill set. And I said, like, seek out and it will find you in terms of knowledge. I will tell everyone my all-time favorite book. It's called The Untethered Soul. If you're looking for a little introspection in your life, It's just one of my, I think should be required human reading by Michael Singer. But on the business side, Matt, I'll shoot you a couple of other ones as I think about them a little bit more.
Leandra sent me The Untethered Soul. I just started reading it, and oh my God, by the way, like reading for me is like slogging through wet cement. I'm very slow at it. I'm just like, it's a consequence of my car accident. I actually just have like a hard time reading now, but I love podcasts. And I would just say like couple I want to plug, like 30 Minutes to President's Club. Really, really good. Like
haven't heard
short, punchy. Nick and Armand are just incredible humans, and they've got some great guests on there. Jen Allen, who we had as a speaker at Olympus, is like a featured guest on there, and it literally is. It's 30 minutes to make you a better seller. So if you're like me and reading is it's just so hard, then try a podcast.
You should do whatever medium speaks to you. Podcasts, videos, audios. I listen to a lot of audiobooks. Everyone's not a reader. Zoe, I can send you The Untethered Soul on audio.
Oh no, I'm reading that and I'm listening to the audiobook at the same time, so I can like underline and stuff. But I'm so excited. I've read the first like 4 pages and I was like, okay, this book sees me, and I feel like somebody's reading my mail right now. It's very weird, but it's really good.
Ooh, I'm like I'm like a listener, a newish listener. And I like to like do things while I'm doing that. My brain has to be doing like multiple things at once in order to stay constant. So yeah, I'm on the audiobook train. I also, unrelated resource, my favorite place to draw inspiration, which is going to seem really nonsensical. If you ever go to, I don't know what they're called, like markets and shows where they have like different vendors. We have one in Chicago that's called like Market for Makers. I love going to those and meeting the business owners and entrepreneurs that are there. And they could be selling like soaps or candles or whatever it is. It is so cool to listen to people firsthand talk about like why they developed their product, like what it means to them, how it's so special. Every time I go to one of those, I just leave so energized and like excited, and I just feel full again. So if you're not a reader, if you're not an audiobook person, if you're not in anything, go to a local market, start talking to people, learn their story, hear about how they sell and what has been like a good lesson to them, and use that as a resource. So there's resources out there in every form, as long as you're willing to get creative and use them.
One more note on that topic really quick. If you're not an octopus like Leandra and can't read 8 books at once, I would just say like, it's okay to find a book that's really good. Like I've read Fanatical Prospecting by Jeb Blount probably 4 times. Like it's a book I'll revisit. I've read Atomic Habits. I read it every year. Yes, like there's something to be said for finding a really good book that has a lot of value in it, and it is okay to revisit it. If you really want to just like hammer those things home.
Yeah. Impossible to Inevitable. Matt, I don't know if you read that one by Aaron Ross and Jason Lemke. That's a good one. Amp It Up by Frank Slootman. I'm just kind of now looking at my list of things that I have actually read recently.
Leandra, we might need to acquire said list from you and share it in the Women in Sales Slack channel.
We should start a book club. I'm a big fan. Well, you know, or an audio book club, or I mean, you can listen to anything in an hour now. You can do a podcast of that book club.
We have a book club channel, and we don't have we'll get you in. We're to talk to you.
Hook me into the community of powerful, learners. I love powerful learners.
Yes. Yeah. We have all the places for you, Leandra. Leandra, Zoe, I cannot believe I'm saying this. We're at the end of time, which is wild. I feel like we just started, and I feel like we could have talked for 5 more hours, and maybe we will one day. But for anybody who's out there, make sure to check out Apollo. They have an incredible database of contacts. If you are trying to sell, they got the people you're trying to reach out to. You should reach out to them. If you are looking for roles, they have a bunch of open roles open. Make sure to follow their process. They do have an application process. So I dropped their careers link into the chat here. I believe Zoe's going to drop a careers link into the Women in Sales Slack community shortly after this. So stay tuned for that. Apply to those roles. See if you can get a job at Apollo. Everybody wants one right now. And then if you are not part of the Women in Sales Slack community, get involved, because we are just about to launch a bunch of things at once, and we're coming in hot for 2024. So make sure you're involved. Make sure you are following all the pages, all the things, and we will see you at our next event. thank you all for being here. And thank you, Zoe and Leandra.
Thanks for
Thank
having us,
you.
Alexine.